time. On Sunday mornings, Guy speaks for about between 50 and 60 minutes. He gives a nice talk based on the topic and key lesson at hand. And then after which we'll go right into a Q&A time, which will be your time to join in and ask any questions about perhaps something you heard in the talk or something that you're currently working on in your inner life. All questions are welcome, and we do hope that you do join in and use this time and for the purpose for which it was given. And as always, if you do run into any tech difficulties, just please first get out of GoToWebinar or wherever you're at, try to go in again and see if that takes care of it. If not, then you can always send Kate an email at support@guyfinley.org and she'll be there to help you. Okay, so I'll go more into the Q&A part of it after Guy's talk, and I'll give you some more instructions at that point. But I think right now we can go ahead and ask Guy to bring himself on. Good morning, Guy.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. All right, so would you like me to read the topic and key lesson this morning?
Yes, please.
All right. So the topic today is new understanding to release you from the pain of unwanted moments. And the key lesson reads as follows. If we know it's impossible to put out a fire by feeding it more wood, how do we fail to see the futility of trying to quiet a mind already burning with thoughts by adding still more thinking? All right, Guy, take it away.
Hello and welcome to all of you. I'm glad that you are here joining me today. I need to set the stage for our study time because I want you to see something, as always, that requires you at least momentarily suspending what you would consider your ordinary thinking, your ordinary understanding. If anything should be clear to an aspirant, it is that his or her ordinary old thinking, and that includes any dressing up of those thoughts with so-called new ideas, that it doesn't cut it. We're looking, if we have searched in earnest long enough, not for something new to understand, but a new mind that already understands everything that we're being given. And that's really the thrust of what we want to study together today. I was thinking just before we started, as always, thoughts come to me when I'm sitting here listening to the music and watching these quotations. When you look and you see something that's beautiful, is the beauty because you have these sophisticated thoughts about the nuance of color, shape, shade, relationship? Is the beauty because it's tactile, because you may go and touch that frame or whatever it may be? Or is the beauty because you see something in its entirety? You see all at once something that, by the very nature of the seer, by the nature of the level of consciousness that is taking in that impression, that the beauty is actually inseparable from that level of being. Hence the idea of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When we see something beautiful, it's not because we're thinking about it. We may have thoughts afterwards. We may talk to others and impress them with our sophistication. But the fact of the matter is that a moment of beauty is actually quite silent. A moment of an epiphany, an impression, a deep movement within oneself, in spite of the fact that everything is coalescing, it is very quiet and there's no thought involved in it. I want to make that point because we're going to look at something together that should allow us to at least begin to want to understand our life through a new set of eyes, a new level of being. And you really have to ask yourself at some point, perhaps you will, how did I get to be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old? And in all of that time, keep repeating certain patterns of thought. And never suspect that the patterns of my thinking were somehow contributing to what I was trying to think about how to get out of. I mean, a mind that is being consumed by itself doesn't think to itself, it's being consumed by its own thoughts. It looks at thought like a harbor. The thought of tomorrow is a harbor for the fear of today. The thought of you being a different kind of human being is a harbor from the fact that everything about you bothers me right now. And so embroiled are we in this sort of seesaw action of a thinker being involved in these thoughts that it never dawns on us. And I'll ask you to get to the first part of this talk. Do you ever feel like you're being eaten alive by your own thoughts? I see it and hear it all the time. You go to a restaurant, you see somebody sitting there, and for one thing, the reason they're so busy twiddling their thumbs on their phones or whatever the device is because they can't bear being what they are in that moment. And what they are in that moment is someone who is tormented by thoughts they don't know what to do with. So better that I have thoughts that I at least feel like I'm controlling than to feel like I'm out of control and being eaten alive by my own thoughts. You have to see this. I can only go so far. You lay in bed at night. You're being eaten alive by thoughts. You can't quiet them by doing what? By thinking. And yet that's exactly what we do. And it never dawns on us. I can't quiet these tormenting, fearful, anxious thoughts with thinking. But that's what I do. So there I am, thought after thought piles in. I'm having my coffee. A memory comes in of somebody. I didn't invite the memory. It just appeared on its own. And when that memory comes in, every memory is connected like a delta in a basin someplace, these tributaries. All of these regrets, maybe fears, connected problems, unresolved relationships, they all come flowing in like a river flowing backwards. And it seems to us in that moment, again, because we don't know why we have to do this or go through this, I'm being ambushed. And then, of course, my mind sees the one ambushing me, the one who set the ambush is the thing I'm thinking about. There's an adversary I don't see. I don't even know it's there until suddenly some thought appears in my mind. And as the thought appears in my mind, so in that same moment appears the thinker. Appears something in me that's going to analyze that thought, what it means, and what I need to do about it. The question has to be, if you're following me, how can we, you and I, be consumed by our own thoughts? Is it my mind? Am I the thinker? Because if I'm in charge of my mind, if I'm the one doing the thinking, then surely I can just bring an end to the thinking. But I can't. And we don't want to deal with questions like this. How can I be caught up in such a way and so identified as I am that I don't see the futility after 40, 50, 60 years of what happens when I identify with one of these thoughts. Because what am I trying to do when I have a painful thought other than try to free myself, listen, from what that thought tells me is imprisoning me. What you did, what they didn't do, that thought that I see as imprisoning me doesn't exist without someone it is imprisoning, the thinker. And I sit and try to control or escape those thoughts, and I can't, for the life of me, understand why it is after all these years I'm still unable to do it. And here's the main first part. Up comes a thought. 3 weeks from now, you have this thing. The day after tomorrow, you've got this doctor's appointment. And things are a little dicey. Your mother said the most unkind thing to you. You need to talk to her about that and make sure she realizes that she shouldn't say that. Whatever it may be, you select the relationship. And what I'm asking you to see at the onset of this talk is that there's something in us that believes it's the thinker, and that the thinker is there to manage these painful thoughts. Because the thinker of these thoughts believes it is other than the thoughts it is engaged with. So that when I sit and judge someone, I believe that I am separate from what I judge. When really, what is the nature of this judge and judgment? Other than there is something inside of me that believes it is superior to what it sees. And as it is superior to what? The thought. I see you as a thought. I don't see you. With God as my witness, we don't see each other. We see our thoughts about each other. And what is my thought about you, if not everything that has been acquired over time and conditioned more thoroughly with each iteration, that which first caused that thought to be formed in me, that disturbance that I blamed on you at the outset, and then with every subsequent moment of relationship where you even approximate some of that behavior, it brings up in me the thought of you. And the thought of you is colored. It's tainted. It's scarred. It's filled with the past. And it's filled with the pain that thought itself holds, so that each time it comes up, it can bring up in something in me that doesn't want its own thought. We think we don't want the person. We don't want to be around that person. Look, the person probably is unpleasant. Most human beings are, honestly. Because all they do all day long is think. And they think that they are working on their life or working out problems. They're not working on their life. They are being worked over by a nature that when a thought comes up inside of it, it creates the illusion of someone that now has to deal with it. See it for yourself. When I'm worried about something tomorrow, I believe that the thinker, the one that's experiencing the torment of what may take place tomorrow, I believe that nature exists apart from the thought it's worried about. When there wouldn't be a thinker sinking in some kind of torment if that thinker weren't mulling over and literally being consumed by the thought it gave rise to, and vice versa. And yet in reality, and this is what we're working to see, the thinker is bound to its thought. The thinker is bound to its own thought. The thought and the thinker are not separate. Some of these things drive us crazy, and I'm the first to admit it. Buddha talks about if the tree falls in the woods, there's no one there to hear it. Does it make a sound? That koan, why ask a question like that? The observer is the observed, one of the oldest spiritual truths. The inner is the outer. All of these things allude to this idea that the thinker is not separate from the thought any more than the sound of the tree falling in the woods is different than the ears required to hear it. It speaks to a mutual dependency. And we don't see or understand this dependency. But for instance, you wouldn't think that one end of a rope is separate from the other end of the rope. Can you have a rope with only one end on it? Neither can you have a thinker without a thought. Neither can there be a thought without its thinker. They seem to be opposites. Like two faces of a coin. You see heads, you don't see tails. You have to flip it over to see it. You and I are intended to live with another kind of understanding that allows us to see both ends of the rope at the same time, so that we're not bound by our own thinking, we're not punished by our own thoughts, but instead we have a completely different relationship with that level of consciousness, which is the purpose of all true teachings. No thought can appear without its thinker. Now, I'll put aside some of this, what seems philosophical perhaps, but I tell you it's not. What happens each time you or I face a disturbance in life? Pick one. Perhaps, again, anxious about the future, disturbed by something someone said, or have you ever been disturbed by what someone didn't say? You went fishing for a compliment, or you did something nice for somebody and they never acknowledged it. Worried about a decision that you have to make because it seems like it's a life and death one. In those moments, please, I hope you're following me, it feels as if I have to make a choice. Doesn't it? It feels like I have to make a choice in order to do what? In order to restore, bring me back into that harbor I was in the moment before, so that instead of conflict with what may or may not happen, I have comfort and everything's good. So that's what the mind does. Comes a disturbance and the mind looks through all of its available resources to find an alternative to the moment. Please see this. The mind looks through its resources in order to reconcile that conflict. What are the resources of a mind, of a mind that's troubled by a disturbance? What are its resources? Well, we know it starts with, should I do this? No. Well, how about that? No, because no, that's not going to work. Well, maybe I better push this forward. Well, if you do that, it might get pushed back. Well, retreat? No, you can't retreat. And if you're ever present to all of that activity, you can see beyond the shadow of a doubt. Here comes a disturbance. The mind reacts. There's resistance. And what is the resistance to? I see what I think is the problem. I see a thought. I don't see the problem. I see a thought. I see the thought of you. I see the thought of tomorrow. I see the thought of yesterday. I see the thought of a regret. But the I that sees the thought believes it is other than the thought it sees. It is not. How do I know? Because what is the experience of the seer in that moment other than the content of the thought it's looking at? That's what the mind does. It reaches its resource, the most available thought. I don't know if you've noticed this. It's like a miracle. I can do the stupidest thing, and in a heartbeat, I know it was the stupidest thing. And in a heartbeat, I know exactly what to say or to do in order to correct it. And I believe, as I'm identified with this correcting action, that somehow or other it's part of the genius of the thinker, failing to see that the reason I made that mistake was because I was identified with some thought to begin with and never saw myself doing it. So the thinker reaches for the most available thought. What is this thought that I'm reaching for? Isn't the thought I'm reaching for, to quote St. Paul, whose hopes? We must not have hopes in things seen. Rather, our hopes must be in things unseen. Our hopes must not be in thought. Thought is seen. It's imagined. It's a concept. It's a construct. It's conditioned. It's the past. Thought is the past. You can't have a thought that you haven't had before in this context. So I look to this thought, and I don't see this extraordinary paradox. I'm asking you to see it. On one hand, here I am. You've done this. I'm conflicted. I don't want to be here. I don't want it. And I feel I'm free. This is what people say. I'm free to make choices about how to live, who to be, what to think, to believe. I'm free to make these choices. Do we not think that when we're busy doing this? But if I'm free to make these choices, how to live, what to do, who to be, if I'm free, then why do I feel compelled, almost forced to make those choices? And terrified not to make a choice that I'm free to make. Please try to see this. I'm free to make choices, but on the other hand, I'm actually compelled to make it. There's no freedom in compulsion. What is this compulsion to make a choice in the moment when something that I thought should be like this, that I thought you should be like, isn't like what I've imagined? And as I run into what threatens this image that I have from which I'm identified, then appears the thinker who's going to save the day. From a minor irritation to a crisis. And one day you will see this with God as my witness. God is my witness. It's the exact same pattern. With each wave of pain, try to see it with me. With each wave of pain, each unwanted moment begins with what? A sudden awareness of a negative reaction. I don't even know it's a problem. I didn't know that that little thing that you dropped into that conversation was going to drag me into the darkest place. I had no idea. I was just sitting there listening, having my beer or whatever I'm doing, and boom. Negative reaction. A summary resistance that I didn't even know lived inside of me. And no more does that resistance, that feeling that something's wrong, that disturbance, then in that split second, what's the mind doing? Now, this is happening before there's a thinker. This actually happens all in the dark. This mind, having been disturbed, starts to race through the content of itself to find the most appropriate thought or image that lends the most meaning and justification to the reaction. So that there's this reaction that takes place. This happens in real time. It just happens beneath the threshold of our ability presently to see it. And suddenly there's this string of thoughts. And as this string of thoughts comes together and starts weaving itself together, again, there was no self there stringing these thoughts together. There was no thinker there putting all of these thoughts together in some order. But as they all are brought together, then comes what? A sense of self. So there's a reaction, there's some resistance, Suddenly, my mind is looking for the best possible way to describe to itself what happened so then it can know what to do to deliver itself from that. And as all that's going on, what is being fashioned other than a sense of self that knows exactly what has happened? And once remanded over to that sense of self, now I'm in the hands of the thinker, the one who knows what happened and what has to be done. So that sense of self having the experience in that moment is a derivative of something looking into these thoughts about the past, all that's similar, and then suddenly out I come. And then I think I can see. You know the passage? Most of us know it, Christian or not. The blind shall lead the blind and both fall in a pit. The blind shall lead the blind and both shall fall into a pit. And the actual Aramaic translation of that idea, the blind leads the blind, is that darkness follows a light darkness follows a darkness that calls itself the light. Darkness, what is opaque, gives itself over to something that calls itself the light, but that is itself opaque, and both fall into a pit. And interestingly enough, I won't go too deeply, the idea of falling into a pit or a ditch has nothing to do with physically falling. It's a metaphor, obviously. A blind person leading a blind person, they're going to stumble. But it's a spiritual metaphor. When it says both fall in the pit, it's saying both will be denigrated. The thinker and the thought. That's what the blind leading the blind is. The thinker, okay, I see what's going on. Here's that problem. Now I've got a thought. Now the thought tells me what I am and what I have to do. And so I go forth and my possibilities are defeated. And if you can see this with me, and I hope you've been able to follow me, we have to ask ourselves a question, and a penetrating one at that, I might add. Because what would it mean if I understood, if I could actually see the following? Is the condition that we're thinking about, that we're wrestling with, is the condition that we're struggling to overcome, does it actually exist separate from my thought about it? Or is what I'm struggling with that I can't see because I'm identified and blinded by the reaction? Or is what I'm struggling with in that moment actually a thought of my own? A thought of a mind that I can't see is my own thought. I know I can hear it when I'm speaking. Well, you don't understand. That's a real problem I've got. What does a moment in life in which you are required to take action, what does that have to do with a heartache? Can I see that my thought about the moment, can you see that your thought about any given moment is inseparable from the experience we don't want as we think it? Can I see that my thought about that moment that I don't want is inseparable from the experience of that thinker? This is what all true teachings refer to. I'm experiencing a thought that I don't know is so totally conditioned that every time it appears or something similar to it, I have the same reaction to my own thought. And when I have a reaction to my own thought, what's reacting? The thinker that believes it's other than that thought. The two can't be separated. My reaction and the condition I resist are woven together. They need each other. and they rise and fall together in the same field of consciousness. Let me show you. Again, I'm going to try to bring it down. I think about you. I have an immediate familiar negative reaction. I wasn't thinking about you a moment before. We were sitting someplace and I was okay, and then I saw an expression on your face. Or I'm thinking about what you might do. All of a sudden, I have this immense negative reaction. Is that negative reaction the result of a condition outside of myself? Or is the negative reaction because I'm unconscious and looking at the thought of you and experiencing the conditioned content of my past relationship with you, so that for me, you are that thought. And if you are that thought, you are all of the torment in it. You are all of the disappointment in it. You are all that frustration in it. And that's what I experience in the thought of you. But I don't see it's a thought that has come from my own consciousness. I see you through thought. I'm experiencing what I think is you when it's my own thought. And they appear in my mind. And you can see this. You have a negative thought about somebody, and if you linger there for a heartbeat, it gives rise to more reactions. And the more reactions you have to your own thought, the greater the conflict grows, and the pain of that conflict proves to you that the person you're thinking about is responsible for your pain. So there is the thinker, a distinct sense of self that as it thinks about you, believes it is other than the thoughts that are forming the sense of self in that moment. When I think about my past, I experience the content of those thoughts about the past. I'm not experiencing the past as in the moment I'm reliving. I'm reliving a thought that was formed in the past, that was conditioned by everything that took place there. And then all of that pain that's part of that thought, when I revisit it, I'm experiencing the content of my own thinking. And then the thinker who doesn't want the pain tries to figure out how to escape the visitation of itself to its own thinking, believing that thoughts are separate from the one thinking them. We believe that the pain of a thought is separate from the one thinking about it. I'm going to say it again. We believe that the pain of a thought is separate from the one thinking about it, because the thinker always sees what it is thinking about as the person, the object, the problem, the place. So it always separates itself. And when it does, then it knows what to do about the unwanted experience of what? Of itself, which it cannot escape. Never has, never will. I hope this isn't too complicated. That's why I started by saying to you, when you see something beautiful, you hear music, you don't think about it. Something altogether different in you can see and understand what you're experiencing without taking thought. Christ said, what man, what person taking thought can add 1 cubit to his stature? You may not know this, and maybe it's not important to you, but I can tell you that that particular passage that's out of Matthew 6 follows Matthew 5, the Beatitudes, and then Christ in Matthew 6, he starts talking about all these things that seem so contradictory to us. And speaking of contradictory, what could be more contradictory to us than the moment where we think we have to take thought, in the language of the time, where we believe that being anxious and thinking anxiously about what we're looking at can bring an end to the anxiety in the very relationship between the thinker that believes it's other than the thought that's threatened. How about when I think about the future? When I think about the future, I experience the content of those thoughts as other than the thinker, as it imagines a thought in time to come. Look, do it, see for yourself. I'm thinking about the future. When I'm thinking about the future, am I seeing the future? I see something that's pretty dark ahead. Am I actually seeing darkness ahead? I'm seeing something that requires being afraid and therefore lots of planning. Am I actually looking at what's ahead? You can't look at what's ahead. You're looking at a thought that has been imagined as the future. Not to mention that the thought that's imagined as the future comes with the fear imbued, that thought is filled with. And the more I experience the fear of my own thought, the more I believe that thought is not I. Why would I be afraid of my own thought? Doesn't make sense, does it? Why would I get angry towards a thought that's filled with frustration? Meaning that it's time and time again, run into that same problem. And every time I run into it, I'm more frustrated. Why would I get frustrated with my own thought? I do. You do. I see something just looming ahead. Everything depends on it. Who I am, what you think about me, all of that. It's there. It's tomorrow. It's 10 minutes from now. What am I looking at? And who's looking? What has made that thought? And what makes it? And if we can see for just a split second that this thinker and the thought that it sees as other than its own activity, if I see even for a split second that they are not separate entities, that when I see what looks like tomorrow, I'm looking at my thought of tomorrow, and my thought of tomorrow is fully conditioned by my fear of what tomorrow may bring or the promise of what tomorrow may bring. Same thing. And then you could see it. Now the thinker thinks about the promise of tomorrow, but as soon as that thought's formulated by the nature of this division, the thinker then starts to think, well, but what if it doesn't go that way? And then it begins to look at thoughts that are contrary to the original one that was pleasurable. And then it's in conflict with its own thought. And then it has to get rid of that conflict by doing what? Coming up with more thoughts to reconcile what seems to be ruining the moment because it's so uncertain what lies ahead. It boggles the mind that we could reach an age, whatever it may be, where it never has dawned on us that what I think about the moment doesn't exist apart from the thinker. What I think about the moment doesn't exist apart from the level of consciousness in which it appears. And most important, what else am I experiencing in the moment other than the meaning of my own thoughts, the meaning of my own thinking, what my thoughts are giving meaning to? I experience the thought that gives meaning, and I call the meaning of that thought what I have to avoid or pursue. To catch even a glimpse of what I'm describing here sets the stage for a new kind of freedom beyond imagination. Actually, beyond anything that belongs to the level of the thinking, even the most sublime thoughts. As we work, and we're intended to work, to see that whatever the thoughts are we're experiencing are not separate from the nature thinking about them. Whatever the nature of our experience of our thoughts cannot be separated from the nature that is thinking them. But when I don't want those thoughts, it creates the illusion of someone that is other than the thoughts of the thinker. It creates an illusion. Because I'm having this experience. And the experience can't be because of my own consciousness. The experience is explained away because I'm a captive of this condition that I'm thinking about, failing to see that I'm a captive of identifying with a thought that I don't know is being created by my own mind. This is why I started the talk saying, why do I feel like I'm being eaten alive by my own thoughts? Because that mind, literally, that level of consciousness, is in fact consuming itself. It is being consumed. You see people and they're drained, they're dark, they're negative. They shun the light of day. Why? We talked about it yesterday. I feel like I'm being ripped apart. Ripped apart by what? By a mind that keeps trying to figure out how to control its own thinking. Keeps trying to figure out how to control the experience of its own thoughts. I don't know if you know the story of Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot. But the story goes, he came to some city and there was this knot, this Gordian knot. And anybody that could untie it would be given something or other. I don't know, remember the details. And everybody struggled all the time to figure out how to undo this knot. Are we not always struggling to untie a knot? This binding in us. How do I untie this? Failing to see that what's tied in knots is a thinker that believes it's other than its thought and then takes more thought as the thinker to rescue itself from its own activity. And the more that takes place, the more bound. So the story goes that Alexander the Great looked at this and, so to speak, thinking outside of the box, just took his big sword and cleaved that knot right in half, just cut it in half. Didn't try to untie it. He recognized it couldn't be untied. You and I still don't understand that we're not going to untie ourselves from the thoughts we don't want by thinking about them. And even that idea for most people brings up this fear. Well, if I don't think about how to free myself, how am I ever going to be free? And you can't think to yourself, how am I going to be free, unless you already know, in quotes, you have a thought about the nature of freedom. So whatever my thought is about being free, it doesn't match life. When no thought knows anything about freedom. So we come up to a full circle. There's an old prayer, an ancient prayer, actually connected to the beginnings of the Christian church, pre-Christ. In the teaching of self-knowledge, gnosis. From the unreal lead us to the real, from the darkness lead us to the light, from death lead us to immortality. From the darkness lead us to the light, from the unreal to the real. What is unreal is the illusion of this separation between thinker and thought. Everything harmful comes out of that illusion. Why? Because as long as I believe that you are what I think about you, and I am other than you, I will always know what you have to do and what you have to become in order for me to be free. And therefore, as the thinker, I will make sure that you understand where you have gone wrong with your thinking. I will punish you. I'll punish myself. Again, it's so common to us. How many of you are self-punishing? Maybe you don't think to yourself you're self-punishing. Maybe it has to get to a certain point where the pitch can't be denied. But if you're judging yourself, you're punishing yourself. You're not fixing yourself. You're not making yourself better. No, I actually punish myself when a thought that I have about myself is proven completely to be a lie. Because I believe I'm this kind of person, and then I get around you, and you bring up in me God knows what, and it can't be me that's ungodly. It has to be you bringing up what is ungodly in me. And when I see that I'm ungodly, how do I know? Because I have a thought about what it means to be godly. Thought doesn't know anything about the divine. So here's this thought, and I'm not living up to it. My mom said I had to be good. My dad said I need to be generous. The world says you need to have tolerance. And I swallow it, lock, stock, and barrel. Not that one shouldn't be good, not that there shouldn't be not tolerance, but compassion. And then I miss the mark. I can't live up to the thought. And what happens when I can't live up to the thought? The thinker. You are a terrible person. Failing to see that what that nature is considering in that moment is what it created. And having created the thought of what it means to be good or holy or kind, and then life proves that thought to be imagined, the thinker must then crucify whatever it sees as being having missed the mark, because as it does that, it believes it is other than the mark that it made, that it created. Again, you have to see it. Only the light of a new kind of awareness can reveal this kind of unconscious nature and release us, essentially, all at once. Again, I was thinking earlier, you'll forgive me for a little side path that's connected. We talked about these strange seeming paradox, this duality. Tree falls in the wood. What about one must lose their life to find it? How do you lose your life and find it? And how long does it take to lose it? And how can I be sure while I'm losing that I'm going to find it? These are questions this mind comes up with. And then when it's confused enough, it just decides it's not going to deal with it. Because it can't see that, like two ends of a rope, that the fact of seeing that this captivity, this conflict, this constant sense of being eaten alive, laying in my bed, driving in my car, white knuckles, thinking about some idiot that just cut me off. Do you understand? When you lash out at somebody, you're not lashing out at that person. A thought was formulated due to familiarity and past conditioning, and that thought took on the image. And then you lash out at the image as if the image is what you're actually, what it portrays. Who are you punishing when you lash out at a thought? You're punishing yourself. You're being punished by yourself. When you hate someone, when you judge someone, you're being punished by your own mind and don't know it, because the pain of that punishment proves to you that the mind is correct with its assessment of that person that did you wrong. So the whole thing as it collapses, so is the birth of something that is uncollapsible, that can't be collapsed. As the old body dies, meaning this old body of thought, as it passes, it cannot pass unless it is being passed and transformed into something else. So that the loss of one's life, as I'm describing it, is the same as finding the life that allowed you to see that that freedom was there if you would accept it, if you would begin this arduous process, and it is. The mind can't quiet itself. And we think to ourselves, that's what we want, a quiet mind. Especially when I'm being eaten alive by my thoughts. That mind fails to see that the quiet mind it imagines is this thought. This kumbaya thought, this wonderful, peaceful thought, this statuesque moment. No, it's a thought. And it cannot quiet itself. So I love the idea of meditation. I love the idea of a Christ consciousness. I love the idea of being connected to the presence, practicing the presence. I love the thought. And the love of the thought is the same as the negation of the fulfillment of your soul. Maybe you can see this, maybe you can't. In the thou shalt have no graven images. What do you think a thought is? A thought is an image created by the thinker to rescue itself from the unwanted experience of its own creation. Mind can't quiet itself, but a mind that begins to awaken to itself sees that it is the father of its own frustration, sees that it is the mother of its own misery. It sees the mind acting against itself without knowing it's doing so. And that new awareness, the light of that new awareness, is what brings an end to that relationship, so that as you lose interest, as you lose that life, literally, the life of what? All of that sensation, all of that experience, the life of all that identification, all that attachment and the fear. As you lose that life, which you can't do on your own, as you lose it, lo and behold, you're losing it to what gives you that understanding. So the first becomes the last becomes the first. It isn't something that happens here and then happens there. It's a movement. It's an exchange. It's a rebirth. Something dies, something's born. Not separately, from one comes the other. So that we are basically, gradually, as it must be, because it's too much to take. First time you even begin to become aware of how your thoughts that you're troubled by don't exist without something that brought them up. You say, well, I didn't bring up that thought. The moment did. No, the moment triggered a disturbance. The disturbance had to name something so it would know what to do with itself. And now you're living out the shame of the name. You're living out the pain of the name, not the thing, the thought. And the more prevalent that thought becomes, the more urgent the thinker works to free himself, herself from it. Can't be done. So when the illusion of this separation ends, in that same moment, a new life begins. One of the quotes from the video that they run before I start talking. You can enter a room that has been in the dark. You can enter a cave that's been in the dark for 500,000 years, and you light a single candle in that cave, and all of that darkness is gone. You light a single bit of new understanding in this mind, in this heart. about how deceived our own mind is and how identified we are with that deception because of that continuity it lends to us, that sense of self so familiar. You light a little light in there. The light dwells in the darkness. You bring that little light in there, and all of a sudden, I really want to think about what you said. I really want to think about my neighbor that bothers me. I really want to go into that moment 20 years ago, but sweet God, I can't. I'm not going to let the pain of the appearance of that thought with all of its conditioning, I'm not going to let it drive me. Instead, I'm going to deliver myself that light, that life. I'm going to deliver that thought, the darkness of that thought, into this light that understands it has no authority. Then I begin to find a life that is not bound by time. What is time, psychologically speaking? What was Buddha talking about? Not reincarnation the way people imagine it. There's a psychological reboot, the reanimation of a mind that was intended to be transcended the first time it had that experience. Not bound by the promise of some answer tomorrow. What a strange thing it is. How far humanity's fallen that our hopes lie in a tomorrow that will be brighter than the one today, when the only thing that's darkening our days is our own thoughts and our identification with them, and then the thinking that takes place that calls itself the light. In that awakening that I'm describing, we find the life that we've always longed for, that was never absent. It was just hidden. It was hidden in an illusion that the experience I'm having of the moment exists the way it does because of what I see the moment as being. And the illumination is that what I'm actually looking at in that moment is my own thought. And what I'm experiencing is the content of my own mind. And who in their right mind would want to experience a mind that was dedicated not just to punishing itself, but to prove itself right for doing so? You have to decide these things. I can't for you. I can show you these things, which I'm glad to do, and I can hope that you follow and understand them. And I won't give up until I drop this body. Maybe not even then. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. Let's take a break. Terry, come on and do what we have to do for announcements, and then we'll get busy with our Q&A, okay?
Thank you, Guy. All right, so yeah, we're gonna just go right ahead into our Q&A time. So as most of you know, that you folks that are on Facebook and YouTube, you cannot come on directly to speak to Guy, but you can send your questions in, and Kate will relay them to me and I'll read them to Guy. But all you folks on GoToWebinar, you can most certainly raise your hand and come in and ask them a question. And as well, our friends out in the other room, in the classroom here in our West Coast LLF, please do come in. Just come on in quietly, and we'll get you to sit here and chat with Guy. So I think that's all I have to say right now. Let me just see if I can check my little hand icon, if I've got any hands. I don't see any as of right. Okay, good. Kate just confirmed I'm okay. No hands yet. So let's see what happens here. Anybody out in the other room want to come in and speak? I had this image when you were talking, Guy, at the end. I watched a little reel last night, and it was of this like year-and-a-half-old, it was a cat reel about cats, and there was a year-and-a-half-old child, and she was speaking loudly to the cat, and the cat just took its paw and whopped her head. And in that moment, it was a shock, right? This child just stopped, the mouth opened, there was nothing there. There was no crying or anything. It was just the pure shock. There was no patterns of thought, or it didn't appear to be, just that moment of shock. And I thought how much, like in those moments when we get whopped like that by a person's look or something someone says, it is automatically that dialogue that the thinker and thought right then instantaneously identified with, and no space for anything else but just that sense of self.
Yeah, I've always called those shocks a close encounter of the truthful kind, and that in those moments when shocks come, it's not supposed to create a space into which the thinker and thought floods, but it's supposed to create a space in which you can begin to see the thinker and the thought as it tries to flood into that moment and take over the moment and change the moment according to its conditioning. But you just have to have a certain amount of as it used to be said, you have to really get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And until that happens, you just go on being sick and tired and exhausting yourself even further with useless thoughts and actions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's amazing. Like something I hear you say all the time. I don't know why it takes so long. When you're talking about these patterns of thought, and it's a marvel, right?
Well,
all right, let's see here. Kate sent me something. She has a question from Isabella. How do I allow the experiences without my mind always interfering? And then she has an addendum as well. I meditate, I pray, and sometimes watch TV to shut down, but to no avail.
Hi, Isabella. So, Isabella, everybody, just bear with me. Can a moment of beauty be any more full than it is? And the answer is it can't be. A moment of beauty contains everything that is possible in that moment as it is given. And what is given in that moment is that which we are observing and the observer. They are brought together seemingly by that beauty. What we're looking at here is the fact that the observer and the observed, the thinker and the thought, are never apart from each other. So that there is an action when you see something beautiful. There is an action when you see injustice. Not the action of a mob. The action of a movement inside of yourself produced by the impression that is revealing in that moment the content of a completely different order of consciousness that has conscience. Now, conscience may or may not do something, but it doesn't need to, because the conscience, that awareness of that moment, fulfills the purpose of that moment. What follows, the actions that are necessary or not, are determined afterwards as part of the flow. So, Isabel, you've asked, how do I allow the experience without my mind interfering? If you had a friend, Isabella, your best friend, maybe a twin, actually, and over the years, at first, all was copacetic, seemed like your twin, your friend, was always there to help you in unwanted moments. And then, however it takes place, primarily because the coincidence starts to get overwhelming. Why is my twin, why is my friend, why is that thought always there at the moment that I don't always want? And then you start to recognize, this isn't a friend of mine. Familiar, no question. Important, no doubt. I've grown up depending on it, on her or it or them. Crucial to my well-being, of course, because I fear for my well-being without calling on my friend, with that twin. And then, Isabella, you just start to think to yourself in the middle of another repetitious relationship with an unwanted moment, you just start to say, God, what don't I see here? Not, here's what I see and what to do. What is it that I don't see here? And that very question suspends the usual activity of that unconscious nature, because it already is telling you what you see. It's showing you a thought and then giving you something to do, the thinker to do about the thought. That suspension takes place. Not because you willed it, but because understanding demands that action. It's so difficult for this mind that not doing is a very specific action. It's the action of intelligence catching itself about to be deceived into an unintelligent act. And at a certain point, Isabella, you start having this experience, and little by little, no matter how long it takes, there is a gradual, just like an addict, there's a withdrawal. There's a withdrawal from the love of the sense of myself as someone who's suffering. There's a withdrawal from the sense of myself as someone who's going to save themselves or save others. There's a withdrawal from the future I imagine, where I won't be in fear like I am today. I begin to withdraw from time, from the nature that creates it. Literally, I withdraw from an addiction. I withdraw from the addiction to problems, because I see the problem as a product of thought, and the thinker that creates that thought cannot solve itself. I withdraw because I see the futility of my old actions, of my old relationship with my own mind. Then meditation is natural. Prayer is the action of observing this unconscious mind talking to itself and suffering what happens when you lay yourself down. That's real prayer. And not all at once, and anybody that tells you so is a liar, and yet all at once, each and every one of these insights sows the seed, Isabella, of a new understanding that will increasingly be there with you and go before you to make these moments much more fruitful, much more profitable than they've been. That's all, Tara.
Wow. Thank you, Isabella, for asking that question. What we received here. All right, next we're going to go to the queue first. We'll go and say hello to Jill. She has a question. Here you go, Jill.
Are you there, Jill?
Let me try. Let me see. Let's see here. You're self-muted, Jill, so go ahead and click the microphone. I know she knows how to do this. She's been on.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, Jill, I'm going to lower your hand. Let's try again. In the meantime, I'll read a question that came in. I'll come on here.
Okay.
This question came in from Tony. And Tony asks, Guy, please talk a little about the closed-mindedness occurring during this government shutdown.
In one way, Tony, everybody, I can't discount the question. That wouldn't be right. You study the lives of the masters, the saints and the sages. They may have taken actions, and many did, perhaps to feed the poor, to take care of the unfortunate, but they had no involvement in any form of government. They wanted nothing to do with kingdoms ruled by people so that those people ruling it could know and be verified in their actions and their considerations. Why am I concerned with the government and its closed-mindedness when I'm not concerned with how closed-minded my own government is? That's the whole point of this talk, Tony. You telling me that when somebody does something you don't like, you don't shut down? No more budget? Someone that you've enabled doesn't appreciate what you've done for them. You're telling me that you don't get rid of everything connected to that, or at least threaten that? We struggle not with flesh and blood, but with powers and principalities. We don't struggle with this body or the relationships that we blame all of our pain on. We struggle without knowing it with powers and principalities, with forces and entities, organizations, systems that are invisible to the eye, and for whose activity within us much of what was exemplified through what I just talked about. What do you think this is that I just spoke about? This mind that cannot see, that thinker and thought are the same. That is a government. That is a principality. That is a divided nature. That is an entire level of being, a kingdom unto itself. Why am I closed off from it? Why don't I see it? Because if I could understand it, then I'd begin to understand everything that I see in the world around me, Tony. And not only would I see it, but to Isabella's point, I'd have no interest in it at all. Again, I can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not discounting the question. I'm just enlarging it, Tony. Physician, heal thyself. Before I know how to fix the world, perhaps I should see where it is that I'm absolutely a captive of my own mind. I'm eaten alive. I'm eaten alive. It's not an exaggeration. I didn't have time to put it in the talk. Everything in this universe consumes something, and everything is being consumed. In the spiritual life, the task is to stop being consumed by the world and begin to consume the world, to feed something that is angelic, to feed something of a higher order. Right now, we are being consumed, and we are consumed in part by this interest that we have in why the world is the way it is. You want to know why the world is the way it is? With God as my witness, Tony, dig a little deeper, find out more about yourself. You'll know why the world is the way it is. You'll know what this close-mindedness is. What's close-mindedness? It's this. I know, no you don't. I know, no you don't. This is right, no you're wrong. This is right, no you're wrong. That's a divided mind. And the funny thing is, they gave rise to each other. And because none of them have reality or real substance to themselves, they have to continue to morph. And you can see it. You can see this massive movement, this morphing of, well, that doesn't work. I better get a hold of these ideas. Well, no, that's not right. I better have this. And then stupid human beings believe in individuals that literally change everything about their character so they can acquire power. And why do human beings want others to have power? Because if they have power, maybe they'll stop me from feeling so powerless. It's insanity. But you won't see its insanity until you see it operating in yourself. Then your sanity will be a light in this world that this light world needs more than can be described. Because without that light, this darkness that calls itself the light will continue to drag everyone down into its degraded state. On we go, Tony. Terry.
All right. Thanks, Tony, for your question. All right, just really quickly, we're going to go to Irene in the queue here. I just see a couple of hands that popped up and then went away. So I think it was Jill's hand and Shoshana. So if you guys want to speak, raise your hand. And Laura, I do see your hand as well. And we've got some more questions too. So here you go, Irene. I'm unmuting you now.
Hello?
All right, Kate's saying that she's showing offline. That's right, I see that. So I don't know, Irene, what that is. I'm going to lower your hand. You can come back in. I'm going to try Jill next because I see she just popped in. So here you go, Jill. Let's try you.
Okay, great. I'm on. Hi, Guy.
Hi, you made it.
Yeah, I made it. Yeah, I like the when you said withdraw. I really like that word, and what I got from it was withdraw from these thoughts. These thoughts are an action right now, and I believe that seeing this action is a new action. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I think it is. I can't speak to the formulation of the thought or the nature doing it, but I can
Yeah.
help clarify that, strengthen it a little bit. If a person, at the simplest level, is an addict of some kind, could be anything, food, drugs, shopping, addicted to your scrolling, watching reels, those are addictions.
Mm-hmm.
If a person's addicted to something, and then for whatever reason, one day they realize, I think I'm doing this by choice, but I'm compelled. I'm afraid not to have that drug, have that drink. I'm afraid not to distract myself. I'm afraid not to whatever it is. So then suddenly there's something new in the mix. So instead of the pursuit of pleasure or power, there's an awareness that I'm powerless in this situation because I'm so drawn to it. I'm addicted to it. So when, then, Jill, does this withdrawal begin? Does it begin as an action of will? Or is this withdrawal because I see that I have no will of my own, and now I must surrender the whole notion of being someone who is going to do this or that or the other, who's going to free themselves from their addiction by formulating another addiction? It's the beginning of the end of a relationship with one order of will. Isn't that with the withdrawal? Isn't that what withdrawal is?
Yes.
Well, if that's what you meant, then that's true.
Yes. Yes. Years ago, I heard you. There was a tape. There was a tape of the Month Club, and I remember briefly the talk was like, "Lunking lurkers leap." So these lurkers are in the dark corners of my house, and the only way to get ahead of them is to see them.
Yes.
And it was a very powerful talk, and that was 20 some years ago.
And look,
And so your talk today reminded me of that.
And it comes to life anew, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. See, that's the most extraordinary. That's the most extraordinary thing in the world. All that's changed is the degree of light within your consciousness, not the conditions that are illumined by it, but by your awareness of it. And as that light grows, so does the sense of safety, well-being, and ultimately a new kind of consolation where a person doesn't have to take thought because they're tired of being taken by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Guy.
You bet. Nice to hear from you, Joe.
All right, Guy. So now we're going to go to a student in the room who you will recognize.
Oh, no.
Hi, Guy. It's good to see you. Mostly, I wanted to come on and say, well, it's good to see you. That's what I wanted to say. But I love this talk, and I feel like ever since you left, I feel like I do feel being eaten alive by these thoughts. but I know that that's absolutely necessary. How would I have ever known that something in me was so dependent on something outside of myself unless I could start to see this nature that's just chewing on me, right? Constantly. And so I wanted to get on. I wanted to break the ice about coming on. And I just wanted to share that. And thank you for your talk. I love that.
You're welcome. And it is, I tease you, but it really isn't good to see you at all. Yes, I set you up pretty good, didn't I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did. See you later.
All right, bye, Dan.
Oh, gosh. All right, so I think I'm gonna, before I go to Laura, I'm gonna go ahead and read a question here, guys. We have several. All right, this question came in from Frida, and she asks, my mother passed away 2 weeks ago, and I have lost other people before, but this time everything felt different. My thoughts kept trying to explain this and figure out why I wasn't crying as much as usual and why I wasn't as sad. I don't know why this is, maybe because I'm busy taking care of things and had to arrange everything, but I don't want to cultivate a feeling or look for something I should be feeling. Could you perhaps explain more about how this works? Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is a marvelous stage in your development, Frida. And you even phrased it pretty well. I don't want to cultivate a feeling or look for something I should be feeling. Everybody examine that if you've ever been through even something similar. Gosh, I'm missing the feeling of being miserable. Ever have that moment where you think, boy, things are going too well. Shoe's going to drop. What mind brings that up? So here is Frida in this instance, and something's happened in my life where something isn't going to go look for a thought about this and all that this meant and what happened and all the strange idolation that takes place. I know this won't be. Death is natural. It doesn't mean that you don't love somebody, that you don't suffer for their absence. But you can also understand that what is absent is just a form. And what's really absent is the usual feeling of oneself connected to that form. So that for first, when a person passes, this, I, that, or I was a terrible person, I should have been like this and I wasn't. So that this natural space for something new is crowded with thoughts. And it's crowded with thoughts because the thoughts are all conditioned and contain all of the things that one should feel or that one shouldn't be in those moments. And all Frida is saying here is that I can feel there's a kind of absence here, but I'm not going to go look for what's missing. When I know what's missing is misery. What's missing is my judgment of myself. I don't have to go, that's it. I don't have to go looking for a feeling because I'm awake enough to be present to all that I'm being given now. And that may or may not include this business that she's talking about. And of course, when someone loses someone, there's business that has to be done. If you're a soul family member, even if you're not. My mother, my father, my brother, when family members of mine passed away, by and large, most of my family members didn't want anything to do with it. They robbed themselves. But it wasn't that they didn't want anything to do with the actual passing of that form or that person. What they didn't want anything to do with was with the emptiness of their own thoughts. They didn't want anything to do with the torment of their own thoughts, with the anger they may have had towards that. My older brother, God bless his soul, he never came to peace with my mother. Because he never understood that the thought he had of my mother was not my mother, was not his mother. My mother, like all mothers, like all fathers, like all of us, do reprehensible things. One day you'll understand that. A human being can't not do reprehensible things. Do you know why? Because that human being believes that the thought they have about something must be attended to in a specific way, and come hell or high water, I'm going to control, challenge, change, or do something to make sure that that thought returns to the safe harbor of a self that creates it in its own image. It's going to do it. And if you're in the way, too bad for you. Or, I need what I need. I can't deal with you right now. Look, I say I love you, but I'm so full of pain, I don't know what to do with myself. And now you want something from me? I can't do anything for you. And all of that's expressed through what seems to be rejection. So here's my brother feels rejected by my mother. And probably she did do things like that. We've all done things like that. But then he spends the rest of his life, every time he thinks about my mother or comes up in a conversation about her, and he immediately is what? He's filled with the thought. He can't see that my mother might have changed, and did, by the way. If a human being doesn't begin to at least suspect that they need some significant form of change in their character, by the time they die, they were dead all along. And so we actually keep people dead. We bury them before they die, because we imbue them with all of the bitterness that's contained in our conditioned ideas about them. And that's all we want, is that conditioned idea, because that's how I know myself, as someone other than that person. And so not only did my brother condemn himself to not changing, but so did he condemn that relationship, which could never have anything new in it, because he would never enter into it anew. Sorry for that long explanation, Frida, but I wanted to get everything in. That's enough of that, Terry.
Gosh, thanks so much for that, Guy. All right, so I just wanted to let you know it's about 10:57 and where we're at. We've got 2 hands in the queue and we have 2 questions left, so that might be perfect.
We'll do those 4 and then off we go.
Sounds good. Okay, so Lara, I'm going to go. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Can you hear me, Guy?
Hi, Laura.
Hi. Haven't seen you since Tips. Nice to be here with you and Terry and everybody. This was a good exercise while waiting.
Yes.
Of course, the thinker got pretty active.
Yeah.
And then there was a chance to, of course, I'm not looking for ordinary, taking guidance from thought. So I guess what I would like to say, I guess, is so during the talk, there was a lot of heavy blocking from receiving. And so what's wonderful is that, I can go onto YouTube, and especially with the transcript, that's a different level and a different pace to sometimes, because, there's like 30 vortexes in every talk, which is where you can go. So, so I had the first sort of a little shock when you said about, you're not seeing the person, you're seeing the thought of the person, the you. And it's like the mind says, well, I've heard this a million times, but no, it was a different level. It was something so deep in there.
Yeah.
Then I noticed the thinker was up in the blocking. And then the second one that really, I could still feel the depth of it. It's very strong, is, you said, am I really struggling with, is this the problem, or is it just my thought of this problem, right? And I could feel that, the depth, the truth of that and the freedom just under it. And then there's the closing down and the just, then the thinker activity. And,
Yeah.
and so I'm and then I also kind of want to share something, but that, if that's enough, that's fine.
That's good for now, and you stay with that. Here I am, and I'm looking at this moment, and I believe the moment is separate from my experience of it. And what is my experience of the moment other than the meaning my own mind has placed on it? So what I'm sitting and resenting or hating or fearing is the meaning that my own mind has ascribed to that moment. And that meaning, again, this is levels, can't be separated from, well, how attached am I to this particular relationship or how people should treat me? So you begin to see the whole substructure of an unconscious nature and how it keeps this illusion in place and how we've been deceived by it. But the light reveals it, and the light will take it apart. It will dismantle it. The light dismantles that unconscious nature. You stay with it, Laura, okay?
Thank you, Guy.
You bet.
Thank you, Lara. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to a question before I go to Robert. So this question came in from Grace, and she says, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. I'm unable to work long hours. I've been placed on light duty. I'm unable to take care of my bills and my child. I've been feeling depressed. What can I do to stop feeling this way despite of what is going on in my life?
Just give me a moment. You know, Grace, the question has so many levels to it. First and foremost, as I always say to everyone, and something that I practice myself at all points in time, I must learn to do what is in my power and refuse to do what is not. I must learn to do what is in my power and refuse to do what is not. As an example, my own life, Grace, without detail unnecessarily, I have been on a certain protocol to deal with a certain condition for a couple months, and it's honestly, it wiped me out. I didn't like feeling that way, still don't. But to not want the feeling is to waste the energy that I can use to see that there's a nature that actually believes it shouldn't be feeling that way. What greater evidence, Grace, of this undiagnosed cancer of the soul than to believe that it is meant to experience life the way it wants to, as thought prescribes. And then when thought suddenly realizes life isn't going to be the way I've imagined, then the thinker steps in and begins to say, well, you've been dealt a bad hand. I was a decent person. Why did this happen to me? And what am I going to do about all these things? So this is at many levels. And of course you're debilitated. And maybe light duty is all there is. Maybe just getting up is all that one can do. Maybe just sitting quietly. But can I sit quietly without falling into a thought that fills me with despair because instead of being active, now I have to be quiet? Or can I actually understand that maybe this time of being quiet has something in it that I need that I never would have seen? How dependent I was on being active as my mind said I should be. And if I'm debilitating myself in this struggle between this thought of what I see is coming or what is actually landing at my doorstep, And all of that energy is going into not wanting. Can I, maybe in this instance, I'm just throwing this out, Grace. I have so many things to be against. What can I be for? Resistance is useless. It spills the energy that a person needs out into a desert floor that nothing will ever grow out of. That's what resistance is. But the same resistance, Grace, can be used. It can become a source of a certain kind of light by which I recognize the futility of falling into this disgraced or otherwise despairing state. And instead of doing it, I'll just bring myself into this moment as present as I can, and I'm going to watch. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to sit here uselessly. I'm going to do the one thing that maybe I should have been doing my whole life, which is being more observant of myself. And if I do the best I can, if I'm the best human being I know how to be, what more can I do? What is this nagging responsibility that I have when it's impossible for me to respond to it? Does it help the sense of responsibility to be tormented by what I'm unable to do? Does it help me be a better human being if I hate myself for being a bitter one? And we can see it absolutely not. It does nothing. And yet that's where this nature wants to default. To accept your condition doesn't mean to surrender to negativity. It means to see the necessity of surrendering that negativity, because all it's trying to do is formulate and continue Grace as she's been. You do the best you can, and you bring into your heart and mind as best you're able, not, oh God, why is this happening? Please God, save me. All of that's nonsense. You remember God as best you can. You remember what is true as deeply as you can. Bring all of it into the moment, every moment that you have the energy to do so, even the moment that you don't. And something will flower inside of you, Grace, that cannot die and never will and never has. And you'll know it. You must experiment. Let me hear from you, if you wish, in a talk or two. On we go, Terry.
Thank you, Grace, for that question. All right, we're going to go to Robert next. Here, Robert, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Good afternoon, Guy.
Hi, Robert.
So I really was caught by that statement you made about the natural occurrence of prayer, and basically comes from natural knowing. Seeing how much of life's energy is taken up by this synthetic life because of the false self.
Yes.
And I just was wondering, and it kind of follows on what you just spoke about, right? We spend so much time, and rightfully so, observing, Mr. Howard would have said, getting out of that river and going up the embankment and watching the flow as opposed to being stuck in the flow. It's just, I really did appreciate that statement, and it caught me. Maybe I had to hear it, I don't know. But maybe you could speak to that, because I don't really have a specific question other than I was like, oh, I like that. I get that. That's something that's worthwhile. And then the result is that so much time is spent and energy is spent on a synthesized life instead of a real life.
Well, that's how you eventually, and yet all at once, with each instance that it's very clear that that is the case. There's always at least the possibility, doesn't always present itself as formidable, but nevertheless it's there, Most of our actions, Robert, are 100% mechanical. We live under certain habitual circumstances. We create conditions that are complicit with our needs, our desires, and we just kind of fall into a groove. And we call that groove a flow, when it's the furthest thing from a flow, because anything that enters into it that obstructs it becomes something we hate, and now we have to find a new way to go, a new flow to get into. But the recognition of that at least provides an opportunity from time to time where I see, you know what? I am about to step right back into the flow of those thoughts. I'm about to identify completely with the thinking here that is showing me this terrible thing, this thought, and I'm about to get caught up in this loop. I can see it. I want the pleasure or I don't want the pain. It's one and the same to that nature. And in that moment that it's visible, that it's present, that possibility, one can in that moment decide, based on understanding they are about to reincarnate, give birth again to that same nature, that they can step out of it, even if it's just for a few seconds. And you do that, and as you do, you get to see more about what you were about to step into. And that clarifies the action, making it recognizable as something that should have been done and needs to be done at all times. So then you start to see more and more where it is that you don't enter into that new action that thought can't create. The new action is not a thoughtless state. It is a state in which thought is no longer necessary to ensure well-being, to ensure security, and all the rest of that. And one last thing, because I need to say this. You cannot separate a river from the shore. Without the line, without that which contains the river, there is no flow. So in one respect, we speak of stepping in or stepping out of the river of thought. But when you understand the real nature of that movement, it isn't that you're stepping out of it, it's that you're no longer caught up in it. It's there, you're not. The energy is moving, you're aware of the movement of that energy, you're not identified and hypnotized by the objects being moved by that energy. So it's just a completely different level of being. It's so breathtaking sometimes as a person sees certain things that they've been blind to their whole life. They wonder, how did I not see that? And then it becomes evident, because my mind, divided and separated, it sees objects. That's what my mind sees. And the object it sees because it wants to attend to them. And it wants to attend to that object because the object's already known. So I'm just attending to the continuity of myself. And therefore I miss the whole picture. But all of that begins to break down as you see with greater clarity the actual condition, which is what we're working to do. On we go, Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, we'll go to our final question for today. And this came in from Susanna. Just a few days ago, I was tortured by punishing thoughts. I asked God to help me to overcome these punishing thoughts about my bad decisions in the past. What should I do when these thoughts attack me? Just say, go away? What is it that I don't see?
Well, there's so many different ways to answer that, Susanna. What would be the most meaningful for you, I think, is everything that I've alluded to in this talk today. I would urge you to go back and listen to it with your own question in mind. What is this? Where is this pain I'm experiencing without me visiting the thoughts that justify it? Where is this pain I'm experiencing, this bitterness, this anger, this self-hatred, this loathing, this fear. Where are all of these things that I don't want? Where are they that I'm experiencing them, and they are in my own thoughts? So that if I begin, Susanna, to see that nothing is required of me other than to be as present as I can to the fact that there is this bizarre proclivity that I have, this attraction. Nobody wants to see this. Something in us is attracted to what hurts us. It wants to relive what hurts us. Why? Because the thought of that pain was created by that consciousness, imbued with all of the characters that it gave it, and now by revisiting it, I get to relive my own life that I don't want to relive. You got to see the whole thing. And each time you do, you won't ask, what do I do when this happens? You'll know with great clarity everything that you cannot do any longer. And then you'll struggle, you'll do the things that you need to do in order to understand that. Years ago, Susanna, for myself, I realized I had the most useless mind a human being could have. And all human beings have that same mind. Why was it useless? Because all it wanted to do was think. Think about where it's going, what it's going to do, what it's going to eat, where it's going to go, how is this going to work out? Am I going to get enough of this? Will there be enough of that? Am I late? Am I going to get there too early? Why do I feel the way I do? Just yada, 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 yada. Just talk. And one day as I was going through that revelation for the umpteenth time, it suddenly dawned on me a certain understanding. Well, no wonder. No one understands what ceaseless prayer is, but one form of ceaseless prayer is that I'm not going to let my mind be occupied by something that's useless. And my mind is occupied by its own useless activity. It loves it because it always gives it something else to do or solve or suffer through. No. And so on that very day, I decided I was going to practice what I would call ceaseless prayer. But ceaseless prayer doesn't mean mechanically repeating something. Doesn't mean sitting for hours and hours and hours in one place, although one will do that as well if they're in earnest. It means that I'm going to use my will to do what I want with my mind. I'm going to reclaim my mind. I'm sick of my mind belonging to something that wants to take my life, stealing my life. And to reclaim my mind, I need my own attention. So then I realized I don't have my own attention. And then that work begins. And it's not a work of building something, Susanna. It's a work of seeing where something has built itself up in my name and called itself by my name. And then recognizing that that house has to come down. I cannot take it down, but I can surely withdraw from the continuation of its building. And when you do that, in this instance, Susanna, when you see that resistance to an unwanted moment is the same as being attracted to it. I'll say it again. When you see that resistance to an unwanted thought is actually a form of attraction to it, then you know what you can no longer resist. And then it'll just be there. With its pain, with its bitterness, with its anger, with its sense of betrayal, that suffering will just be there, but you won't be there anymore trying to escape it or control it. You will be the witness of the consciousness responsible for its continuous creation, and that's where things begin to change. That's all. I'll see everybody on next Saturday.